Hello and welcome to episode 6 of our season 2 Revolutionary Rich series inside of Here We Grow. Today we have the one and only Anna Rogers, who is joining us from, I believe, Bali right now. And Anna Rogers is an extraordinary woman that I am so grateful to have as a guest inside of this experience, inside of our Revolutionary Rich series. She is a co-founder of Lifestyle Rich and Hey Clients, and I see that she's in the room with us. Hello, hi. For all of you that are dropping in live, welcome. Hi. Can you
Hi.
hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
For those of you that are here live, feel free to drop it in the comments when you're feeling something spark or open or ignite, or that you would love to get to hear from us, and we'll go ahead and respond to what comes through as it flows with us. Anna was in season 1 of our Revolutionary Rich series, so she's back again for season 2. One of the guests that we went really deep into the ways that we have navigated and expanded capacity for wealth that goes with and beyond money from the journey of our lineage and our ancestry, and the patterns and the stories and the beliefs that have really shifted and opened and changed the way that our families have gotten to experience the overflow. I call it wild overflow, the wild overflow of what happens when we write new stories with money. And so thank you for being here. I'm
I'm
so
so
happy.
excited. Our last conversation was one of my favorite conversations from last year. So when you invited me back, I was just like, hell yeah, let's do it.
It was one of my favorites too. And I loved getting to hear about, your origin and where your relationship to your grandparents and the way that you've really paved a whole new path. And I think there's this resonance that I feel with you in such a unique way because of what I see and what I experience. And I'm curious to hear if this lands for you in your own unique way of being one of the few, if not one of the only, women of color in a lot of the spaces that we occupy. And then like what that feels like to be women who care so deeply about social change and about creating a better world for women all over and
Mm.
humans all over, and especially those that have been cut off from resources and that have had access to money or to freedom or to safety. And I know that so much of the work that you've gotten to do in the humanitarian aspect is being able to redistribute and to steward wealth. And that's one of the big pieces here in our Revolutionary Rich series of like, what does it mean not only to get to calibrate and expand our own capacity to receive and hold it, but then also to share it, and to share it generously, and for it to go beyond starting with ourselves and our family, but then for it to go beyond into the larger community and into
Yeah.
the collective. And so I'd love to open up with this question of how, because I feel like there's been so much that's shifted and changed and evolved in the last year. Oh my God. And for those of you that are listening live, those of you that are watching the replay, you can watch the first episode. I highly encourage you to watch the first episode of um, me and Anna going into more of her story and things like this, because I think that right now, in the context of like all of what you've expanded in, all of what you've grown in, it would be so juicy to get to drop into like how you have experienced yourself become even more
Mm.
revolutionary in your leadership
Mm.
because of the way that you have really continued to deepen and grow in your relationship with money and with richness and with wealth.
I love this question. I think for me, it's just going deeper into the mission. I've always, this is something that I've shared with you in the first episode, and definitely go back and watch that because that was such a great conversation. But for me, growing up, we didn't have a lot. I come from the Philippines. I was born and raised there. I was actually at dinner last night and I was telling friends, I was like, yeah, my very first job, I was making $231 a month. That was me working 8 hours every single day, and I was making $231 a month. And over the last decade, I've built multiple companies to 6 and 7 figures. But for me, over the last year, since our last conversation, it's going deeper with the mission. And for me, one of the things that is like alive and true in my heart is I believe that every woman has a responsibility to become wealthy, to become
Mhm.
rich. And I say this with so much love because I know that money in the hands of good people can change the world. And if we were all well resourced and have access to be able to make change, we could actually really make a difference. And so for me, over the last year, I feel like this has been going deeper and deeper. And we've gone in with this mission with all our companies, with our coaching company, Lifestyle Rich. It's okay, how can we empower women to become wealthy? With our other software, Hey Clients, we're like, how can we actually give access not just to our users, but also to the other side? So we actually started sponsoring women in Kenya, and we are sponsoring this women's shelter in Kenya, and the women there are being rescued from female mutilation, child marriages. And so we are certifying them so that they can operate within our software. And so women like you can hire them. And so it's completing the full circle of we're empowering women to be able to make money, but at the same time, you're also empowering the other side of the coin, because these women often, by the time they reach like 18, they have no skills that they can use to generate money for themselves. And so it's been really cool from that aspect of, wow, this is what our money can do if we are so locked onto the bigger mission, if we're so locked onto this is what we're doing. And we've installed Starlink in their women's shelter, and they're able to go through our certification. They're learning internet skills, and it's been life changing to know that our wealth is being used for something that's bigger than us. And that's where the personal responsibility comes in, because yes, it's great to be able to use your wealth to upgrade your lifestyle or to change your family's lineage. But at a certain point, you also need to lock onto something bigger that you're like so passionate and obsessed about that the big audacious goals don't seem so big and audacious.
Mm. Mhm. This piece around mission has been such a really powerful and deep through line of the
Mhm.
series so far. And yesterday's episode is with Kimberly, and it was so powerful. She'd watched all of the episodes, I'm pretty sure, before, and so came in with like this really beautiful perspective of like how like every single person in this series, every single leader that is a part of the work of devotion to becoming more rich in a way that's aligned with service, like heart led deep service. Like the mission is continually like fueling and energizing and like giving you life. And that's part of what makes it regenerative. Like it gives you life to be able to show up
Yeah.
in a bigger way and to like clear or to move through or to rise beyond the edges of maybe like the previous limits that we've had or like the conditionings that we've been brought into. And so for you in this last year, when you say like the mission that became so much bigger for you or that you anchored more deeply in it, what would you say then was the shift from prior to then to unlocking this new level, like the new level of the mission that has then actualized and manifested in the way that it has, because I felt like you've been mission driven since the moment I met you, and I'm
Yeah.
like, yes, I like that's part of the resonance of our relationship, and pretty much everyone's connected with in these kinds of ways. And then when there's like a new level, you know, that gets unlocked, and then it allows for more money to come in, and it allows for wealth to be more distributed. I'd love to get into that of like whether it was an internal shift or whether there was something that like helped you to receive or to open or to see, where you're like, oh, actually the mission that I was already on or that was already working in or devoted to or serving, like now let's take it up a
Yeah.
notch.
This is such a great question. I think for me, it was definitely an internal shift. Over the last year, I have been writing my book, and
Yay!
that has allowed me to go inwards in a place that I just didn't even know was there. And so it's taken me initially, this book was, I was just like, okay, I'm going to finish it by this date and this date. And I was giving myself all these deadlines, and it just kept getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. And I realized I had to become a completely different person to finish writing this book.
Mm,
And as I was going deeper and as I was reflecting on my journey and how I have grown, I think that allowed me to like, oh my gosh, like everything that I have done and achieved in my life, there is a bigger purpose to this. It is not just to make me wealthy, but it is to inspire and impact so much more. So like I want the reach to be bigger. And that's when I started going, okay, if we want to reach more people, how does this look like on a more practical level? And so that has allowed Tom, my husband, and I to just like really anchor in on our big vision for our companies and the people that we want to help. And I love that you said that the mission piece is a through line that every person who is devoted to their business, like I don't know if you listened to the podcast between Alex Hermosi and Tony Robbins,
yeah.
but it was the exact same thing. It's like
Yeah.
it
I love
doesn't
the way that
matter.
you, yeah, talked about the
Exactly. It's
measuring
like
of it.
it doesn't matter how many millions you make, but if you're not anchored to this bigger cause, then it's always going to feel empty. You know,
Yep.
we
Yep.
sometimes we develop this level of apathy towards what's happening, towards the money. But if you are rooted towards something bigger, it's a lot more powerful. And so I think that internal shift was going inwards, seeing my journey, recognizing my journey, and going, wow, this is bigger than me. And thinking about the impact that I want to make.
Mm. This is, you can let me know if you want to go there. This is, it's coming up for me of, there's one thing that I know I've seen with my clients in my community a lot, and maybe you've seen this with your clients in your community a lot, where there is that knowing of it being so much bigger, and there's that like the heart in it and the spirit in it and the soul in it, but like there's still more that actually has to happen internally for it to let it in, even though there is that awareness and that acknowledgement. And for me, in my world, that's through nervous system work. You know, it's like expanding our
Mhm.
nervous system. It's rewiring the way that our bodies are relating to money and relating to wealth and like showing up in leadership. And I know for you, so much of your work is in storytelling and like selling through story. And also, there's all of these other ways that you show up in really beautiful leadership. And so, when you're bringing in this piece around, because I think that this is one aspect of what I consider to be revolutionary rich. It's like coming into an internal expansion of holding a greater vision, and also the vision holding you, and like the mission holding you. And then after that's already been, you know, apparent, or after you already feel that, then there's also all of the work that has to happen to like actually let it in, to actually let it
Mhm.
flow. And there's of course, you know, the business side of that, but also on an energetic standpoint and from like a leadership standpoint, I could go and riff on this for days, but I'm curious what comes up for you, like even like in your own personal experience, or maybe even with your clients that you've seen or
Yeah.
in your community, where it's like, okay, well, I know the greater mission. I feel driven by that. I feel like the fire or the fuel or the calling to that. And then there's like everything between
Yeah.
that and then it actually happening.
Yeah, I love this question because a lot of the time, especially as women, I say this all the time, we are intuitive beings. And so we have this natural gut of this is so much bigger than me. But I think the problem comes, and this is where the disconnect happens, is where a lot of people focus on the how. They're like, this is the mission. And they are so focused on the how that they forget the who. When in reality, for us to get to the end mission, we have to focus on becoming that person to actually get there. And so rather than focusing on, okay, these are like the 10 steps to get this mission and focusing on, I need to do this and then this needs to happen and this needs to happen. It's just like, okay, but who are you being? Are you actually that person who will be able to get there? And so this comes to the deeper work, right? It's the inner work of, am I actually showing up as that person? Am I actually making decisions from that person? Or are you still making decisions from where you currently are? And so there's this very nuanced piece of, okay, from a business perspective, this is the how and this is the strategy to get there. But more important than the strategy is who you are being on a
Yes.
day-to-day basis that will actually impact how you get to that vision. And I think this is where a lot of people kind of lose the plot a little bit, is they're like so focused on finding the next strategy, or they're so
Right?
focused.
Right?
Yes.
Talk about this all the
And
time. I'm like, it's not the strategy.
but then you lose, it's the how you're thinking, how you're feeling, how you're feeding your body, how you're feeding your mind, how you are moving on a day-to-day basis that will actually get you to that bigger vision a lot faster. And so, which is really ironic because I'm like a business coach, right? I'm like strategy, but this is the beautiful thing about like our mentorship is like it's strategy, but it's also very nuanced because yes, I'll give you the strategy, but at the same time, I will also be the mentor to question who are you being as you execute the strategy, because that is arguably like 80% more important than the actual strategy. Strategy is everywhere. I can go in ChatGPT and be like, okay, how do I do this launch? And it'll give me like a launch plan, but the execution, the belief, the inner knowing of this is how I need to operate and this is how I need to make decisions is completely different.
Mm. You know what I love about what you just brought in here? Because I talk about identity work a lot inside of like expanding our capacity to be living and leading from a place that we've never experienced before, right? Because obviously, like it's uncomfortable, it's edgy, it's unfamiliar to be existing in a new state of being or to be holding an identity that like we're not used to existing in. And what I'm really like wanting to like there's kind of this thread that I feel is coming through in what you're sharing here when it's like embodiment behind the strategy, of course, of like who you are being. That also brings up, I think about my journey of like gosh, like the times in my life, I mentioned this in one of the other episodes, how I was reflecting on when I was just working all the time, scraping by, and I had so much debt. The American debt system is like insane I went to like my dream schools, and because of that, I was just drowning in debt to be able to I got scholarships, I got grants, and then I was like just struggling. And I had this big vision, like we're talking about, like I had this big vision, this big dream. And I knew in my heart, but the being part
Mm,
is what continued to activate or unlock like different up levels when I started to see myself in that. And I noticed that with a lot of the people inside of Here We Grow as well. When it's like, oh, when you start to see yourself as that person and then hold yourself in that way and then respond to life in that way and then calibrate yourself to that way. And so for you and your journey, what would you say? And feel free, like you can ask, away anything that comes up for you as well in this conversation. Like, what would you say when you were at, let's say, the multi six figure mark?
Yeah.
before you had unlocked into the multi-million dollar mark, like who were you being then at the multi six figure mark when you knew that you needed to be a different version of yourself to
Mm.
become the multi seven figure version of yourself?
Oh, this is such a great question. So, my journey, and like this is something that I openly talk about. In the beginning, it was very much built from the push energy. It was very much built from, I need this to work because there was no way I was going back to the Philippines to a job that was barely paying me, working 13 hours a day. And so, when I first started my business, it was literally like me with my back against the wall, and I'm just like, this has to work. And so I was operating from this like grind culture. And although now I'm like, oh, like that gives me the hypes, but it was what I needed to get that initial push. And, even now I'm not afraid to admit that. And this is something that a lot of people get wrong. A lot of people think that the feminine way of business is just leaning back and relaxing and not being stressed. I'm like, stress is good in a certain capacity when it is fueling something that's bigger than you. And so for me, when I was building my business to the first six figures, it was from this push energy. And then you reach a certain point and you're just like, okay, for this to go bigger, I know that this is not actually doing more, but actually being more. And so there was this internal shift of what does this actually look like? Because a lot of the times to go from six figures to seven figures, we're just like, oh, we just have to do double the output of how we're working here. But then I realized that that's A, not possible, and B, that's not actually how I wanted to grow my business. Our entire business is like create a life full of money and moments. What good is the multi-millions if you're not actually having fun, if you're not lit up by your everyday life? And
Yes.
so that shift was, again, an internal shift. And then it was, okay, if this is the bigger vision, what do we actually need to do to execute on that? And then how joyful, easy, relaxed, and in love can we be as we work towards that? And so it kind of becomes this counterintuitive process of, I'm at this level, but I know I want to get to this level, but I know that it's not going to happen by working harder. And it
Yep.
was just like this weird process. But as soon as you dive into it and you start actually, it's not even just like manifesting a different level, it is literally operating at a different level. It's making better decisions that will actually move the needle further. It is moving with clarity of, this is the type of business that I want to build, and therefore I don't have time for the noise. I don't have time for anything else. And it's kind of, you get this like laser focus of how you want to grow. And so that jump of who I was being from six figures, I was very much like the pull energy of, this has to work, this has to work. And then it's like, okay, after that, it's the push energy. And then after that, it's like, how do we get to the other side in a way that you have fun? And entrepreneurs who have built businesses that last, this is one of the most common themes. It's just like they're so lit up and excited, but by what they are building, that it doesn't feel like work, that it doesn't feel like a slog or something that they're enduring, but rather enjoying.
Enduring versus enjoying. I love this.
Mm.
It's so good. It's so good. I love that, you know, one of the things that I talk about a lot is the way that we've been indoctrinated within like patriarchal capitalist systems that tell us to push, 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 and then how that disconnects us from our body's ability to feel pleasure
Mhm.
and to feel ease and to feel joy, not meaning that there aren't times that are hard and, like you're saying, stressful, of course, and like all of the new challenges that happen at every level. And I think that one of the pieces that I want to just anchor in for everyone here that I think is, I see this at all levels. Like I see this even with people who come into my world who are already at the multi seven figure mark, but like they built that from that other energy. right? And then now they're like, oh gosh, like my body or my system is so used to operating, like you brought in the
Yeah.
word operating, it's so used to operating from this place of like just not feeling as what I call regenerative, like not feeling as life giving as I know it can be. And it sounds like one of the things that really opened up your own expansion of your wealth and service to this greater mission was like, how can I operate at this higher level while letting it be even more fun? Like actually knowing that like that's the hack, like that's the somatic secret, that's the wealth code. It's like how can I literally infuse my business or my work or my mission with as much fun or as much joy, as much pleasure. I call it being inside of the pleasure palace,
Hmm.
knowing that in our full spectrum like humanness, there's going to be the really hard times, right? And that like there's also the resistance that comes when you're like about to break through. And I actually kind of want to talk about that a little bit because I
Hmm.
think that for so many of us, I can say I can speak for myself and I can speak for like the people that I know I've supported through this on a leadership standpoint, like it's right before you're opening up to an entirely new paradigm
Yeah.
of your life that so much of the old shit comes up, like the old stories, the old beliefs, the old patterns, the old um identity. Like it comes up because your body wants to protect what it knows, and it feels like it's too dangerous to be in the unknown. But the unknown, as we know, is always where there's the most growth in that discomfort. And so, in this conversation of, you know, stepping into more and more and more of your richness and becoming the person to embody that on an
Hmm.
identity level, on a leadership level, what would you say were some of those maybe pivotal points of resistance? Kayla's here. I'm so happy Kayla's here. What would you say were some of those pivotal points of resistance? Oh my God, I can talk for days about this myself,
I
and I'd love
know.
to hear from you because I know that that's something that a lot of people don't necessarily talk about as much, like the points of resistance right before we have our major breakthroughs and like what we move through in that experience.
I think, this is great because a lot of people think that up leveling your identity comes with complete clarity, and you're just like, this is just the person that I have to be, and I'm just gonna go. And actually, upgrading and up leveling your identity comes with a lot of fear, comes with a lot of doubt, comes with a lot of, can I actually do that? Okay, so to give everybody context, I am not a natural public speaker. In fact, about 3 years ago, I would literally break into hives every time I would enter a Zoom room. I would be so nervous to speak and ask a question that I would literally have to write down my question so that my mind does not go blank and I don't forget it. And it's been moving towards the edges of what I know I'm capable of and the impact that I want to make. And so when Shoshana asked me to speak at her event, and I immediately just said yes. It was 1,000-person event, and I was just like, yes. And then I worried about the oh my God, can I actually do this? And in fact, when I spoke on that stage, that was my very first time public speaking. And so can you imagine first time public speaking in front of 1,000 people? And it came with a lot of fear. It came with a lot of doubt, but I had this like gut feeling and knowing that I was meant to share that story. And so I went on stage, and the you say yes to opportunities despite the fear, despite the doubt, despite the can I really do this? And like what you said, those voices, that's in our subconscious, and our subconscious is literally just trying to protect us and keep us safe. And so a lot of people think that as soon as they experience fear, this is a sign that it's not aligned. This is a sign that maybe this is not for me. I'm not meant to do this. But actually, when you learn how to lean into the fear and lean into the things that scare you, that is when magic happens. That is when your identity upgrades on a cellular level. And so for me, speaking on that stage, coming from someone who would literally get hives and speak and get nervous, to speaking in front of 1,000 women, that changed something in me on a cellular level,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that A, I can do hard things, and B, your identity is yours to rewrite at any time. I say this to my clients all the time. I'm just like, as soon as you realize that you are both the main character and the director of your own life, I'm just like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
everything is possible. I'm just like,
Mm-hmm.
if I had ever limited myself to going, I could never speak on stage because I'm so scared, I'm like, then I would have never impacted as many people as I did that night. And so it is playing around with the edges of your own expansion, facing your fear and knowing that the fear is normal, and actually leaning into it, going, okay, how edgy can I go? How much can I push into this new identity? Because the more you do it, the easier the identity expansion comes, the more you
Mm-hmm.
calibrate to a next level. You know, I was nervous in that speech. The next time I spoke on a public stage, I wasn't as nervous because now my body going, okay, you're not going to die, you're fine. And it's just like, it's constantly that. It's saying yes to the things that scare you, but also make you feel alive.
Yes. I love that you use edge of expansion because it's one of the things it's one of my sayings I say a lot. I have a whole program called Edge of Expansion, and I'm like, how are we continually edging our expansion and then saying yes to what it is that
Yes.
gives us life? And then how does that continue to serve our own ability to show up for the things that, you know, for so many of us, and I know this is true for us in our own unique stories and journeys, like it has never been done in our lineage before. And we didn't get really into this, but I want to just tap into it for a bit because I know that there was someone here who was listening to this, whether you're watching live or whether you're listening to the replay, where there is, generational patterns that have been passed down that make it so that when that when our bodies have that fear response, or when our bodies have that, like, oh my God, am I gonna die? Like, that is so real. Like, it feels so real. And part of the liberation work that we came here to do for the world, it starts with us, of course, liberating ourselves and liberating ourselves from the inside out, and then allowing for that to then ripple out into the world. So,
Mm.
in that vein, we've been talking a lot about leadership and embodiment and capacity and writing our own stories. And I love that you also say the authors and the stories, because I had like a creative director background in my life. And so I
Mhm.
would always say that to my students and my clients around, like, you get to take ownership of the story that you're creating as both the director and the actor, and knowing that there's also actual patterns that your body has that makes
Yes.
it hard to do that when these have been passed down from 7 generations back, 7 generations forward. So what would you say, as we come to a close here, is the most, let's say, in this last, we'll keep it to this last year, unless there's something else that comes up for you and you're like, actually, I want to talk about this, the most, like, liberating pattern that you have broke, that
Mm.
was passed down generationally for you?
I think for me, it is definitely playing small. And
Mm.
this has been patterned in ingrained for me culturally. Coming from the Philippines, women are meant to be subservient. They're meant to be at home. Like, I was even talking to a friend last night, and I was just like, yeah, growing up in the Philippines, I had never even met anyone who did not have kids. It was just the norm to graduate, get married, buy a house, have kids, and you either work at home or you get a job. That's it.
Yeah.
Those were like the stereotypes of what life could be or what life looked like. And it was for me like liberating myself from that. I did that because I've always been passionate about like stepping outside of the box, coloring outside of the lines. Like, that's been my big message since we started our very first business. But I think for me over the last year, it's like, okay, but how big can we actually go? And I caught myself playing small in different areas, and I realized that these were patterned in me, and unless I was willing to call my own bullshit, and unless I was willing to call myself out, then there was nothing that was going to change. A perfect example was when I had originally set my sights on writing the book and selling the book. I was just like, yeah, I want to sell 100,000 copies. And then I was talking to a friend, and she was just like, yeah. She was just like, why not 3 million? And I'm just like, oh, and I like initially, like I felt my heart just go like clamp up. And then I went home and I was just like, oh, this is another perfect example of I'm playing small because I'm scared, because I'm scared that what if I don't reach that goal or this? But I've always been a big believer of just put the big audacious dream out there and then worry about the how later. So I'm just like, okay, I am setting my sights and selling 1 million copies. And do I know how? Absolutely not. Do I know, how I'm going to get there? What's that going to look like? All of these things I do not know, but I know that I'm working towards the who. Who do I have to be in order to actually execute on that big dream? And so a lot of the time, women are playing small. And this is a big theme within my book. And it's a common theme, and we don't even know it. We are playing small in so many ways. We are playing in small in the boundaries that we set for ourselves, in the boundaries that we're setting in our relationships, in what we want for our personal success, in our big mission. Like there's so many different ways that women are doing this without even realizing it. And as soon as I started seeing this pattern, I was able to call myself out. I was able to actually, okay, this is a pattern. How do we get ourselves out of it? And it's literally like taking action to combat that. It's feeling into that and go, okay, where is this stemming from? Understanding that and rewriting new code in your body to know that this is actually not true anymore. It's no longer a belief that's serving you. So it's time to let that stuff go. And so
Mhm.
it was a lot of work around that. And even like with the big mission of, what we want to do, like initially we're like, okay, let's sponsor these women in Kenya. And then when Tom and I started thinking bigger, and we started going, but how big can we go? And we're just like, I want to build more women's shelters, more schools. Let's do this. Why does it have to stop there? Let's actually expand the work and the mission. And that comes from calling yourself out when you're playing small. And so that for me was one of the biggest shifts over the last year.
Mm. Wow. One of the things I really love and appreciate about this response is that it can literally apply until we die. Like
Yeah.
it never ends. It's like the continual growth and evolution of our actual human capacity. And I think that's
Yes.
what's happening, as we look around the world of people like just reaching new capacities that were never experienced before, like how much impact can one person make, or how much um like wealth can one person distribute, how much, but like not from the place of measuring as a measurement of success, but in service to something that's like, I have this one lifetime and I have this one body, and I want to see how, like, what I can create with it, and
Yes.
then unlocking that over and over and over and over again, and then having the self-awareness, which is, I'm so happy that you're like bringing this in, of how it's so recent and relevant, because I think that all of us go through this, or at least those of us who are like extremely ambitious, like those of us who are like very high achievers, like I know we are. It's like, wow, we think or we believe we're playing big because it's a new edge, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm sure it was for you with like the book, like that's a new edge. Like I had this whole thing too where I was like, I'm gonna write the book by this timeline, this deadline, and I was like, oh my god, that's like, I don't like the way that this is happening. I need to really stretch this out and let it be more spacious and let it be more fulfilling and let it feel like it's like a creative process that's rejuvenating or replenishing, versus like, I think wanting to get to a certain place. And that's one of the other, I don't know fallacy is the right word for it, but I think it's one of traps, maybe. It's one of the traps of when it comes to like successful uh women who care so deeply about like making the most meaningful change that we possibly can, is that there's like this a head that's always here.
Yeah.
And so that difference and discernment, I think, is actually really important. And I'm happy that you also brought in the Hermosi podcast, because I think that that's relevant in this context as well, of like the difference between being ahead and like wanting to be ahead, but actually like I get to dream bigger,
Yeah.
and then I get to be bigger, and that's actually honoring to me and to why I came here to do what I'm doing. So thank you so much for bringing that in. It's such a good like anchor point for us. Oh, so good. So as we close off, the question that we end every episode with, and I loved how you responded to this last year, is what right now in your life, and I know you've shared so much of this already during this last about 40 minutes together, so maybe it's something new that hasn't come up yet, or maybe it's something that that you've already tapped into a little bit here. What is feeling the most revolutionary rich inside of your leadership right now?
Mm. I'm trying to remember how I answered the question last time, but I can't actually remember that.
It'll probably be something new. Oh, I remember. It was your family. You were spending time with your family at that time. So it was like a lot
Mm,
about the quality time and the experience that you
yes.
were creating and things like that. And I know you just got your home renovated, and there's all of these big projects and initiatives that are happening. So I'm sure there's many ways that this will
Yeah.
show.
So for me, like you said, it's manifested in so many different ways. So we're here in our home in Bali, which we just built. And it's really crazy because Bali was the first place that Tom and I traveled to when we first launched our business. And I remember so clearly at that time, we were literally staying in a place that was $15 a night and it had a bucket shower. And now we literally just built a villa in Bali and paid for it in cash. And it feels like this crazy full circle moment. But for me, the thing that's been feeling revolutionary rich is relationships and the importance of creating relationships and creating pivotal moments for the people that you care about. And so we're here in Bali at the moment, and we're so blessed that we have a great community. It just so happened that all our friends are here at the same time. And so we're constantly having dinners, board game nights, playing paddle. And it's like knowing that success in business isn't actually just about working and making money, but it's also fostering relationships with people around you. And that is actually what allows you to plug into your business and be more creative and bring more of this like magnetic oomph and joy. And people are just like, what are you on? Because I want some of that. And it comes from feeling rejuvenated in your personal life and also with your work life. And so that to me has become so much more apparent because of the community that we have right now who are all currently here. It's like weaving in the play as part of your business. And I was actually
Mhm.
talking about this to a client. I was just like, burnout happens when you are not intentionally weaving in play.
Yep.
And like we literally have every Wednesday, we call it our Wacky Wednesday tradition, where we're just like, Wednesdays is like, we take almost the entire day off and we play paddle, we go for massages, we all go for sushi. And it's just like, how can you bake in play into your everyday routine that actually fuels your business? And I know a lot of high achieving women who feel guilty when they take time off. And I'm like, why? I'm like, that's actually what fuels your creativity. That's actually what fuels your business. If you want to be 90% more productive, take time off. Spend time to just ideate, be, play, and do all of these things because that fuels everything else.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so good. And this is so on theme because I want you to listen to the previous episode. We were going so deep into pleasure, like
I
literally
love it.
pleasure as activism, pleasure as social change, and like continually weaving in, I call it the pleasure palace inside of Here We Grow, but like weaving in pleasure as a natural way of being and letting that like turn you on and juice you up. And then this piece that we can sometimes forget is like so much more important then I think is really acknowledges the community piece and like
Yeah.
not just and I'm really happy that you named this because it's not just online. Like we have our online communities. Most of us are in masterminds or we're in different group spaces and we're with people all the time on screen, but like being in person in community. And that's when we met and then we
Yeah.
kept seeing each other in so many of the same places in person in the room. And it's those kinds of connections and those kinds of relationships of like really enriching the quality of our life that directly then like serves the mission, serves the business, serves the leadership. And it has me so excited for Here We Grow Live because we're going to be in the Pleasure Palace in person. But I am just so happy and grateful that we've gotten to drop in together and to have this conversation for season 2. And for those of you that have been with us this whole time, thank you for staying and for tuning in. For those of you that are watching the replay, go ahead and drop what landed for you in the comments. And you can also reach out and let us know what sparked or what opened up for you. You can let me know. And is there anything else that you'd love to leave the viewers, the listeners here with before we end the episode?
I think the main thing that I would encourage everyone to do is to really reflect on where does your responsibility come in when it comes to becoming rich? And
Mm,
imagine what you can do with that, not just on a material level, but on a bigger picture. Because a lot of the times, especially for people who are like scraping by or they're on the day to day and they're like, in the daily grind, it's so you feel so disconnected to what will it actually feel like to be rich. But I want you to reflect on that on like a not just on a materialistic sense, but also on like what you can do with that and anchor into that, because that will actually allow you to anchor into this bigger vision, making everything just so much more easier. So that would something that I would love people to reflect on is that.
mm. Thank you for bringing that in. And I actually want to expand on this because I love there's people who might be listening to this and you're in that place where you're scraping by. And then there's also people who aren't scraping by, like you're already established, you're already successful, you already have really high sustained cash flow, but it still might not feel as rich because of that quality of relationship to your work and in your body. And I see that, and that's why I love all of the different things that we've talked about inside of this series. Like I see that the people who are the most rich, it goes far beyond money. And so I'm happy that you brought in, like beyond the materialism, because it's like, yeah, you can buy all of the things and it can still feel empty, but it's like feeling rich is a state that is chosen, that once you have more than enough, and
Yeah.
once you're not in the scraping and once you're not in the day to day, but you're in, like, you have the depth of course the security and the stability, but also the foresight to be looking like 10 years ahead of something that's so much bigger than you. The richness that you are resourcing your with, it doesn't necessarily come from money.
No.
Like once you get to that point, like it doesn't come from money, but that's where that responsibility of like, how is what I'm doing allowing me to feel and be rich.
Yes.
So good. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If this is your first time joining for one of our episodes, please drop a series inside of the comments if you would like to watch this replay, or if you'd like to watch any of the replays, and it'll get all of the replays sent straight to your inbox, including the ones that are coming up for the rest of the week. And I will go ahead and close us off here. Thank you so much, dear love.
Bye. Thank you for having me.
Bye.